Hi, my name is Daniel Griffith. I'm a documentary filmmaker. My company is Ballyhoo Motion Pictures. And on behalf of the Horror Track and of Netherworld, I would like to welcome you to the Nightmare on Elm Street panel. I want to say hi to everyone that's watching on DragonCon TV. Hello, everyone out there. Sorry you couldn't be here, but of course, if you were here, we may not get into the room. So we both thank you, and we're actually glad you're there. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and announce our very special guest, starting with Mr. Robert Englund. Next we have the very lovely Ronee Blakley. And last but not least, we have Wyss. And we're going to open this up to questions, and we have someone out there in the Netherworld, right there, this lovely lady here in the center. If anyone has questions, please line up behind her. We'd love to hear from you. Don't be shy. Don't be the person that's scared to be the first person. Yeah? Oh, he's got it. So this guy has got it. He's going to put on his wig. He's ready to go.
Don't be shy.
Hey, I'm Kyle, and super excited to see you guys here. For Robert specifically, like, is there a concern when you do something so amazing and so iconic that you'll never escape the role? I bet you probably hear that before, but how do you get out of the shadow of such an amazing role? Like, how do you beat that?
Well, I was lucky. It's pure luck. It's happy accident. I had done, I think, 12 or 13 movies before I did Nightmare on Elm Street. So I was established in Hollywood. And you know, when you're an actor, it's New York, Hollywood, sort of all that matters. I'd had quite a deep A-list career. I starred with Susan Sarandon and Henry Fonda. Jan Michael Vincent was a huge 70-star, Burt Reynolds, Charles Bronson. I sidekicked for a lot of the big actors at that time. Peter Strauss, who was huge in the TV movie world. So I was pretty well established as an actor. So I didn't suffer that damage. In fact, after the first two movies, I was still going back and forth to other big projects, both in television and on the big screen. But it's only because I'd had that 10 years from 1973 to 1984 in Hollywood, working steadily. Had Nightmare on Elm Street been my first big break, you might be getting quite a different answer from me right now on my psychiatrist's couch. But I was taught by Wes Craven to respect the genre. And like all of you, I was a fanboy, a deep, deep fanboy as a child. Not only did I mow lawns and go to the Saturday matinees with my friends and sit through double bills of Hammer films and great science fiction movies of my childhood, but I also have this great memory of being obsessed with old horror and doing sleepovers with friends, fellow Cub Scouts, when their parents were out of town, and we would, get a big can of popcorn and lay in our penny sleeping bags, with the hunters shooting the geese out of the sky on that cheap flannel. And we'd get in the den and we'd turn on the big 21-inch screen RCA black and white movie and watch the uncut Frankenstein, where he still breaks the little girl's neck and throws her in a lake. And the uncut King Kong until 3 or 4 in the morning, with car commercials every 15 minutes, but Kong's big foot still squishes that poor little African child as he's making his way for the giant gate. They hadn't cut that out yet. And so I was obsessed with this stuff. Forbidden Planet was a major marker for me. I saw it in VistaVision the day it opened at a matinee with my friends, and we could not, for the life of us, determine what the monster from the It was. And then one day, in the 3rd grade, that kid that's in every class that can cartoon and draw well, Ronnie Walker, was sitting in the back of the room because he could hide his papers and the teachers never saw him doodling. And Ronnie was the guy that would decorate your blue three-ring binders. And Ronnie screamed from the back of the classroom, "Saber-toothed tiger! It's a saber-toothed tiger!" Because we'd already gone back 3 times trying to figure it out because it was only outlined in lightning and electricity. And these were huge formative moments for me. And when Wyss told me to respect the fans and respect the idiom of horror, all of that came rushing back to me. Sitting in my godfather's home and leafing through a giant coffee table book to the golden age of horror section of the 30s, and then back to the silent era and seeing 3 pages that folded out of all the different makeups of Lon Chaney. One that intrigued me where he boiled an egg and took the placenta off a hard-boiled egg and put it over his eyeball so he would look milky and blind. The First Contact Lens, silent movies, Lon Chaney. And that may be the latent love I have as Robbie Englund, 8 years old, in his godfather's office, looking at these books. That may have been the little voice that said yes to Wyss and the challenge of the makeup for Freddy. I don't know, but I'm sure that had something to do with it. So Wyss taught me to respect the genre, and by respecting it, when I came out of the makeup in 1994, I was older, I had aged, I grew a beard, and I started acting older than I was on film, because now I was being offered the psychiatrist in a horror movie, and the old doctor, and the priest, and the poacher. And these were roles I normally wouldn't have had coming off of my 70s work, but because I'd stayed loyal to the genre, now I was breaking into the Vincent Price roles and the Klaus Kinski roles. So, as they used to say on SNL, horror has been very, very good to me.
Thank you very much for that. For both answers to a very big
So what about you? So, Ronnie, like just your track record in the industry, but also your exposure to horror, prior to Wyss approaching you about nightmare.
Well, from childhood, I had to be carried out of the Wizard of Oz when the witch turned green, and in adulthood, I'd be frightened by Nosferatu, and as a 9-year-old, I was terrified by body snatchers, looking for pods under the bed. And then in adulthood, I did play in some horror movies and some television shows. Tales from the Dark Side. I appeared in Salem's Lot. And of course, Nightmare on Elm Street came to me as a gift, really, because I had separated from my husband, Wim Wenders, who was the boss of Anita Lucioni, who was my roommate in New York and worked for Robert Shea, the producer of Nightmare on Elm Street. So she thought I would be right for Marge the mom in Nightmare 1. So I was called in to meet Wyss, and that's how I got it, simply by going in to meet, I guess like everybody else, but that's what happened, and I didn't know about horror movies much. I wasn't an expert in it. I hadn't really acted in one before, but I thought that I could do Marge, and I thought it was a challenging role, and I thought it would be a successful movie. I had no idea how successful it would be. I had done a movie called Nashville, which was a country musical and a political film by Robert Altman. And I had done The Driver with Walter Hill, and I had done Lightning Over Water with Wim Wenders and Nicholas Ray, and Reynold and Clara with Bob Dylan, Hammett with Sam Shepard and under Francis Coppola's aegis. So I had also done some television and some television movies by then. But I didn't know that much about horror, so this was a very big movie for me, and it still is. We love it that it lives on. We have developed a real true friendship over the years, and we can never thank Wes Craven enough for what he created for us to inhabit these roles, and his gift for casting, and all the young people that he brought to stardom, and everything that he did for us. Yeah.
Ronee is also a huge swing and dynamic. Like when the movie would never have been made without Ronee. Ronee, had star cachet along with John Saxon. But Ronnie's swing is so huge. Like, I'm a fan of Salem's Lot. I've got my Stephen King movie, but I knew her from that. But I also knew her from Nashville, and I also was a bit of a male groupie for going around and hearing her sing in country venues around Los Angeles. So, it was so exciting to hear Ronee was going to be part of the project because she had this huge cultural swing, and the inventors and everything else. I mean, she had, she was touching Europe on that aspect of it. And Amanda, of all the young kids in the show, Amanda was the most well-known, which I think is one of the reasons Wes killed her off first, because he knew that nobody would see Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984 would ever think that Amanda Wyss was going to be the first Indian to fall.
Yeah, I was going to say, you kind of talk a little bit about your career kind of leading up to when you were approached about Nightmare.
What do you mean, like, what did I do before Nightmare?
Yeah.
Well, I've done a couple TV movies and Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and I've done a couple TV series, and then I got the call to go read for that, and I just thought it was such a beautiful script. It read like a great horror novel, and I got to read for Nancy. Obviously, I didn't get that part, but he brought me back on the callback. He brought me and Heather back at the same time, and we read together. And he told us in the room we had the parts, which never happens, by the way, and forged great friendships along the way. So I was excited, and anyway, it's been an amazing experience because how much everybody loves Nightmare on Elm Street. It still boggles my mind. I mean, I know there's a lot of love for Fast Times at Ridgemont High too, but it's just like horror fans are.
Yeah. We were also blessed by the new technology. Almost immediately, the video paradigm expressed itself in a new way to see movies. And then shortly after that, cable. And then shortly after that, DVDs. But there were box sets. There was the making of videos, the making of DVDs, the digitally remastered, the Blu-rays. And it became this whole new viewing experience like streaming is today. And we all benefited from that because what happened is a lot of great movies from the 40s, 50s, and 60s had a theatrical release and then disappeared forever. But we had this continuous life. So I remember at some point, before we even finished the franchise, we were on almost our third generation of fans because of those various ways that fans would discover us.
Thanks for the question, guys. Next question.
I've always wondered how much of Freddy is Wes Craven and how much of it is Robert. And also, did it kind of scare you to have to get into Freddy's headspace for so long?
I didn't hear the last part.
Was it scary to have to get into Freddy's headspace and be that character?
Yeah, getting into Freddy's headspace.
It's all Wes Craven. Everything's Wes Craven. We violated the Wes Craven Bible in part 2, the party sequence. They needed to have an intercut there of either Kim Myers or Martin Patton asleep in the pool room, post-sex or something, I don't know. But because it has to be a dream. Freddy can't exist outside of a dream. You hear about Freddy whispered in a locker room or at a sleepover or a slumber party. You hear about this man, this child killer in a red and green sweater, who wore a hat, he made a claw. And the rest of it manifests in your imagination, especially if you're related to any of the vigilante parents who set him on fire. And that's where he exists. So everything is structured and set up by Wes Craven, the mythology, the rules. I called it the Bible. That's a television word for the sort of set of rules and regulations governing any particular show. And no, it's all Wes. I mean, I improvised a couple of lines. One turned out to be a classic, but 90% of what you love, 95% of what you love is written down by Wes and the other writers. And you know, Wes isn't the only famous writer on the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. If you look, there's people that went on to win Oscars and write bestsellers and everything else. There was a strange gift at New Line Cinema for assembling really remarkable people that would go on to influence Hollywood in lots of different ways. Roy Wagner, who shot Part 4, changed the look of television with CSI and the deep focus and the color field use that we all become accustomed to now. But he raised the quality of American television, the way it looked with that show. It was one of the subliminal reasons we all loved it so much. But getting in Freddie's head only happened once, and it was real simple for me. And I'm going to tell this story because I showed it to a band today while we were signing. Somebody brought a pink fan, a battery-operated pink fan today because it's so hot in Atlanta. And I was sitting there, Nightmare 1. I had doubts about doing it still. 2 weeks in, hot, summer. Desi Lou Studios. We're in the old Lucy Desi makeup room. I'm on a barber's chair. I'm getting poked with a brush that's like all crusty with glue, and it's been used since 5 in the morning. And in waltz Johnny Depp and Heather Langenkamp, arguably two of the most beautiful kids in America, if not the world at that moment. You could land a plane on Johnny's lashes. And Heather Langenkamp was what you wanted Brooke Shields to look like in real life. Because the real Brooke Shields is beautiful, but she's tall, like a fashion model. And Heather's, how do you say, bite-sized. Anyway, and they sat there, and now they proceeded to get makeup. And while they were getting makeup, they needed makeup. And while they were getting makeup, they were given little tiny pink plastic battery-operated fans to keep them cool. And it was like, cool. It was like, wait a minute. I'm sitting here. I've been up since 5 in the morning. I'm being basted with Vaseline and KY jelly, poked with a crusty brush. What am I, chopped liver? You know? And yet I thought to myself, wait, this anger, this envy of their youth and their beauty and their entire careers ahead of them. I said, I can use that. I just bottle that. It's a finished thought. It's an actor's trick. I'll bottle that, and that'll be my anger and envy of them because Freddie kills children. Freddie kills youth. Freddie, and what is youth and what are children? They're our future. You know, so I can use my jealousy and my envy of Johnny and Heather every time I have a scene with them, and I could use that throughout the whole franchise. So that's how I got into Freddie's head. The rest of the time I was in craft service with my claw, sticking one of those little cocktail weenies.
Hello, this question is for Mr. Englund. I have two interpretations of the end of Freddy versus Jason. So, Freddy won, correct?
Freddy's what?
Freddy won their battle, right? Freddy versus Jason.
No, Jason kicked my ass up between my shoulder blades. I hope they like that upstairs. Anyway, but Freddy can't die if you think of him. And Jason's met me now. So when that big dog falls asleep, I'll get him in his dreams.
Ronee, I was going to ask you, the first time that you saw Robert in makeup, you know, here's Freddie, the first time, what was your reaction? Because I mean, looking at kind of the script, and you're reading through a script and you're having a sort of description of what this this adversary of your nightmares would be like. What was your first impression seeing him?
Well, it was pitiful because it was so hot, and I knew he was suffering inside all the makeup and all the layers of plastic and stuff that he had over his face, and he has very sensitive blonde, pinkish skin and blue eyes, and he had suffering under his prosthetics, but he was also terrifying. So we'd be eating lunch, you know. I'd be eating lunch across from Freddie. Imagine.
Amanda, what about the first time you saw him?
Good question.
Thank you. Well, you know what's interesting? The first time I really saw you lit, and when because I don't remember, I think I saw you in pieces in the makeup trailer and stuff, but it was in the boiler room, and you would come up behind me, and there was we were rehearsing a scene, and I turned around, and with the light and the fire was behind you. It was in person, I think even scarier. Well, it was scarier to me, but it was unreal. I was like, oh my gosh, this is something. Like, this is crazy. I found it really, like, it was just so beautiful and scary, and usually in person on set, you don't really feel that way about something on
I
set.
remember that day, and I also remember you and I had really severe marks to hit. When I was behind you, we had to keep the space, we couldn't look down, and we were on that grate of a catwalk.
Yeah, it's like narrow, there's fire behind us.
Yeah, and I remember it's very exact. You and I were mostly just trying to dance that
to hit our marks.
Yeah.
But it came off well, but really the motivation in that scene was like, hit your mark, hit your mark, hit your mark. And I do remember a couple of times, because you get inured to seeing you in the makeup, and we'd all be eating lunch, and then like something would just fall off your face, and you'd be like, oh dear.
No more salad dressing for water.
So I remember those moments a lot too, just like, you know, you'd be talking about Shakespeare or something, and in the middle of the story about, oh my God, yeah, you know, I just saw Romeo and Juliet, blah, 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 your face is falling off.
Well, I think I worked quieter and more intense, partly because of the exactitude in the staging with Amanda. I mean, you know, if we weren't walking on a catwalk, we were upside down in that room. And also I was intimidated by Ronee a little bit, so I was serious around her in that sequence. But it was Heather. I gave Heather a lot of crap. Because Heather, I had to get Heather on to this point where she would trust Robert, you know, because Wes would say, oh, pick up Nancy and throw her over your head. And I go, well, all right. But Heather, you know, because you're intense when you're working, I mean, I think I did put little thumbprints on Heather.
Yeah.
By the end of the movie, she had my fingerprints on her.
I just found, like, I do remember, like, I just feel like every scene I had in the movie was technical. Like, I was always up against, like, running down that alley and having to hit, it was just, everything was so technical. The boiler room, the alley, the ceiling, the only room, the scene that, no, even the scene with all of us kids and Johnny putting the music, and then it was so technical, like, I could only move, like, this much on the couch, and I had to do things. So, like, I felt like for me, the movie was all about my blocking. It was like everything was about my blocking.
Next question.
I was just going to say, I thought Robert's makeup and appliances were fantastic. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that.
That was David Miller, and you guys know that, but David Miller had just come off of, he's really the unsung hero of the Michael Jackson video Thriller. That's all mostly his work. David's pretty wonderful. David's makeup looked the best, you know, in a medium shot, medium close-up, and a wide shot. It caught the light better. And the Kevin Yeager makeup survived close-ups a little better because it was more prophylactic thin. It was like, you know, like a balloon almost. And both of the makeups were porous, so they did breathe. So even though I have to pretend to be hot and miserable, it really wasn't that bad. Now the next question.
This is oddly specific, but I was wondering what your favorite scene from Wes Craven's New Nightmare was.
I didn't hear the
Your
beginning.
favorite scene from New Nightmare. So your favorite scene?
Oh, mine? I love the Miss Me. The entrance. I love the rise out of the bed. But I also, that's an improv line too. I improvised that line, Miss Me, where he comes out of the closet. But I love the rise out of the bed. And that was a day of work because we had to get that. You know, I have all these different claws. I have a mylar claw that catches the light. I have a rubber claw for when I fight with Tina, that little bee. And I have the softer ones, and I have real ones that can cut through anything for certain hero shots, we call it. But that's not the glove I wear in the bathroom. And so it was all day, and we literally had to sharpen the blades because I had to get that cut coming when I was underneath the sheet. So we get that perfect reveal of Freddy. And I love that Freddy comes from under the sheets. Where kids read Harry Potter with flashlights, make tents and feel safe. You're not safe.
So every child is hidden under the sheet. And you look at those dark corners when you get to bed, and you kind of think of what is going to creep out from the end of that bed and come through the darkness. So it's kind of, I always thought that scene was brilliant. So, thank you. Great question.
What was your favorite Freddy moment?
You said your favorite Freddy moment?
The one right now where I kill that Q&A punk in the center. You know, there's so many. I really think it's an amazing classic scene in cinematic history on the ceiling with Amanda. And, you know, I only worked for about a third of that. Amanda was in there every day in the revolving room, which later became the revolving room. And we used gravity, the gravity of the revolving room, to have the blood come out of Johnny Depp's bedroom. It was redressed, that set. But that's a remarkable sequence. And I'm really proud of that. I like my performance the best in part 4. And I was exhausted, and I'd lost weight. I'd just done another movie. But Ronee left me alone, and by then I kind of owned the character, and he let me dance it a little more. And it's, remember again, Freddy's in the dream. He's not having a cigarette in the alley. He's not earthbound, so he's in your imagination. So he could move a little bit differently, and Ronee let me kind of go free and wild with that, which I really appreciated.
Woo!
Yeah.
So I know you worked with a lot of different actors and directors, so who's your favorite person that you've ever worked with?
Robert? She's asking you.
We should all take a crack at that. That's a great question. How sweet, fresh meat. No.
Okay, I'll answer. I got to do a movie with Robert Mitchum, and I just have to say that was just really cool. I mean, I worked with so many amazing actors and directors, and they're all amazing for different reasons. But just for sheer, there is no person cooler, I don't think. And he's so talented, and just the way he stands there was amazing.
Can I tell a Robert Mitchum story?
Please.
Courtesy of Jan Michael Vincent. And they did that big mini-series together, Wings of War. And Jan said that the first day he worked with Mitchum, he had all these pages in his script that said NA on them, and he'd fold them and tuck them into the script. And Jan said, Bob, what's that mean, that NA? And Mitchum turned to her and said, it's no acting. That's a no acting day. And Jan went through the script and saw, and it just says Robert Mitchum's character gets out of a car. Robert Mitchum's character walks upstairs. And he would do that so that on those days he knew he could go out and party the night before.
That's a great story.
Ronee, who's your favorite person to work with?
Aside from present company, I might say Keir Dullea was great to work with. We did a movie that I forgot to mention called The Mannequin in Canada, in which I gave birth to a monster. Keir was so incredible. And Ryan O'Neill was wonderful in The Driver. So many, and I worked with fantastic actors in the film Nashville. So many, every actor, so many to name. Nicholas Ray,
Well, you worked with
Perhaps
like some of the greatest.
In Lightning Over Water, the film that we did together, we did a scene actually that I wrote based on King Lear, and that was a precious, precious moment. And the things that he taught me, you know, the people teach us, you know, and then we don't forget. Like Nicholas Ray taught me this, that he said the more personal you make it, the more universal it becomes. He taught me that. And he said, we all come from better homes than we care to admit. He would just say things. And then, when he was dying, my brother had given a party for him with a bunch of guys, and they wanted to speak to him. And Nick said to me, there will be a time and a place. Just things he said. And everybody I work with tells me things that I remember.
I think for me, I spent 6 weeks sitting next to Henry Fonda in a Kenworth 18-wheeler truck. And I spent that same 6 weeks living with him and sharing a Winnebago motorhome on location up in Northern California. And I was so intimidated, but I'd already been to his house for lunch because he had to approve me for the part. And I'd gone through all that, and I had befriended his beautiful wife, Shirley. And at some point, Henry realized I began my career in the theater. And an extra light went on in his eyes, and he began to tell me about his roommate, Jimmy Stewart, when they were young, living together and working at the Provincetown Playhouse in Cape Cod. And he told me about a hot little girl that came to work at the theater, Betty Davis, and her even cuter sister. And he opened up to me and told me all the stories about Mr. Roberts, which was a seminal hit on Broadway. He told me all the stories about that and other plays he'd done, and he kind of really gained a new respect for me. And then towards the end of the movie, there was a scene where the great Eileen Brennan had to break down, and I would come out of the back of the truck where I'd been sleeping with Susan Sarandon, and I would walk up the side of the truck, and it was an incredible tracking shot. And I had to walk and not trip over the railings that they had laid down for the dolly track. And I had to be heroic for the first time in the movie. I'd been playing nerd up until then, and now I had to have my shoulders back. And I had to stand a little taller because I was going to drive the truck. And I got to the door and I would open it up, and you would see Henry Fonda dead in the lap of Eileen Brennan. And she had this great line. She just had to turn to me with tears running down her face and say, "Drive, boy." And we did it, and we did it. And of course, yes, there's going to be a couple of takes that are the camera's fault, or my fault, or the door didn't, or the door stuck, but we did it. And we kept getting it right. We kept doing it again and again. And Henry sat up from playing dead in Eileen Brennan's lap, and he turned to the director and he said, "You can't put this woman through this again. This woman is giving you 150% of her heart and her soul. If you can't get this damn shot right, I'm going to call the scene." You know, because she was a method actress, and she was giving it her all. She was getting to play Henry Fonda's lover, arguably the greatest actor in American history on film. Maybe Marlon Brando, maybe Jimmy Stewart, but right up there. And Daniel Day-Lewis, but he's not American. But, sorry you guys, I'm a fanboy too. But I remember that moment so much because that was an actor protecting another actor. And it was just a great example of love. And he wasn't using his power or his stardom. He just was defending this other actor who was just laying there playing dead. You know, he didn't have to do anything. But he could tell what she was going through every take. He could feel it, you know, because he was lying in her lap. And I'll never forget that.
See, it's not just an Elm Street panel. This is a film history lesson, guys. The history of what they've done and where they did thus far, it's miraculous, and it stretches beyond just this really great roles that they have in this particular film series. So.
Hey, before today, I forgot she was in Salem's Lot and that she worked with Nick Ray. Go ahead.
Wait, what did you say?
You were going to say something.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, well, I was gonna say
before this afternoon, like you guys are learning it, I forgot she was in Salem's Lot, which I love.
Yeah.
And I forgot about Nicholas Ray. We forget each other, the depth of the work here, of the three of us.
And I forgot to say Keenan Wynn when we were asked about actors that we revered working with.
I was wondering if there was a remake, another one, who would you want to see play Freddy if they got someone else, and who would you want to see play some of the victims?
There are myriad actors in Hollywood. There are so many great young actors working. I've been binging the last week with a melted pint of coffee ice cream, Mindhunter. And every character actor on that show I've never seen before, and they're brilliant. And that's a show about serial killers, which is my way of saying any one of them probably could have done a really decent Freddy. There's a couple of genre actors. Oh, help me here. Bill Moseley. Now, Bill's getting a little long in the tooth. Bill would be really interesting. And I learned from you guys 6 months ago that apparently there was an internet rumor about Kevin Bacon. And that's an interesting choice, too. Kevin is a great physical actor. And I think Freddy requires that. Kevin's got about a ½ inch on me, which I like because that makes Freddy taller. And Kevin does not poo-poo horror. You know, he was great in Tremors, brilliant in Stir of Echoes. You know, there's too many actors these days that I see them on talk shows, and they're in a horror movie, and they sit down next to Jimmy Fallon. They go, well, it's not really a horror movie. It's a psychological drama. No, it's a horror movie. More blood, for God's sake. Quit apologizing. Why should a horror movie be any less than a cowboy movie? Or a gangster movie, you know? Or a chick flick. I mean, it's part of Hollywood. We have to embrace all of it. We embrace the high, and you embrace the low.
Great question. Next.
Hi, I actually think that I have to mention this. My little sister, when she was about 12 years old, told me that Freddy Krueger was her ideal husband. And when I asked her, what are you going to do about the claws, without missing a beat, this 12-year-old put her hand on my shoulder and said, Justin, there are compromises in every relationship. Unrelated, my question is, we've all heard of things like Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, and there have been things like Leprechaun's Face. What is the weirdest take on Freddy that you've heard of that you're kind of bummed you didn't get to do?
Well, I would have loved to have maybe been a guest voice for Seth MacFarlane with his Freddy on Family Guy. And there's also a Freddy. I did the Simpsons Freddy, but several others. South Park has a great Freddy. Of course, I think Trey does every single voice on that show. But now there's enough of us that can imitate Trey. But I love to see, all of those. And I think that there's a point where you surrender and you have to let your child go out into the world. And I've done that several years ago with Freddy. So I love the new takes that are done. There's some great internet YouTube versions of a kind of prequel Freddy or early Freddy that I like, that are really interesting. And if I could go back in time, there was a script kicking around, and I'm not sure of the title. It might have been called The First Kills, Krueger, The First Kills. I can't remember, but it's the prequel of, it's not the series, Toby Hooper version of the prequel. It's centers on Freddy and the children, two bumbling cops trying to catch him. Finally, Freddy's caught. And then these two sharp lawyers. And these are the real stars of the project. Get him off, get Freddy out of jail. But you see Freddy in prison. You see him meeting with his lawyers. You see Freddy in the courtroom. You see the lawyers going back and forth with the prosecution and getting Freddy off and get away with, obviously, murder. and walking down the stairs of the courthouse, gloating, and then finally the ending is you finally see Freddie burn, like Joan of Arc, and by the vigilante parents who just can't stomach this injustice anymore. And the rumor was it was going to be John McNaughton directing that, the great director of Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, starring Michael Rooker. And I was excited, and for a brief second of time, there was some validity to that project. And then when New Line was sold to Time Warner, et cetera, in terms of broadcasting and all of that, it sort of got lost. But that I guess I could consider that a regret. That would have been one that would have been fun to do, and I was still young enough to do it. I had some ideas. I wanted to dye my hair red, like I did in Freddy versus Jason, and I, things like that. I had some ideas to play with it. That's probably my only regret.
What about like Freddy's Christmas Vacation?
And that party scene in Nightmare too.
That would be awesome. I can see the DVD cover. It'd be just like when they have for Christmas Vacation, but you're in your sweater. I think it's a great idea.
It goes to Elm Street. Surfing.
I can't give it away, but I have an idea for us to do a new one.
I know Ronnie's been having dreams about the cast of Nightmare on Elm Street, and she's putting them into a plot.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so this question goes out to Robert. I want to know what made you take the Freddy role in going into the Goldbergs when I thought I heard
I did the Goldbergs quite simply because I think my agent would have kicked me off the roster. My agent, it's his family's favorite show. They love it, and Joey loves it, my agent, because he still has really fresh memories of the 80s, and he loved the 80s more than I did. And I got a beautiful letter from Adam, a beautiful, beautiful email talking about the 80s and how important they were to a huge amount of our culture and population and demographic, and also that was true. He really did have to go next door because his Jewish mother didn't want him to see Nightmare on Elm Street. He had to watch it with a next door neighbor. And I just thought that's funny. And here's the real reason, bottom reason. Well, they did make me an offer I couldn't refuse, but the real reason was I got to hang out with Wendy McClendon for a week. And, I loved her on Reno 9/11, is that like 9/11? Yes. And I love her in Bridesmaids. And she is genuinely, along with Kate McKinnon, she's genuinely one of the 3 or 4 funniest women working on television today. And it was just so fun working. I mean, I bit the inside of my mouth the first time. She said, "Aye, it's Mr. Nicey Fingers." Thank you.
Hello. So I host a horror podcast, and this is a question for all of you. I put Freddy in the category of what I call the Fantastic Four, which is Mike Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Leatherface. So if you guys...
Just as long as you don't include Chucky.
So if you guys had the choice to dive into the role of any of the Fantastic Four and redo what they did, what would you change and who would you pick?
I'll go. Just stick me in Halloween with Jamie Lee.
Okay, well,
I can see you at Camp Crystal Lake.
Well, that's kind of where I was going. And I think, I don't know, I think it would be fun to take that character and really bring in the supernatural almost elements to it, make him move a little better. Have him move where you're not sure what world he's in. And I'd make that character move in a really ethereal way, I think it would make them even scarier, and it would bring in that element of, you know, somebody that's been reanimated recently. And I don't know, I think it'd be fun, and then just kill them all.
Ronee, are you going to throw down on Jason? What are you doing?
I don't know what I could throw down. I mean, I'd love to do the Janet Leigh role in Psycho, but I can't imagine improving upon it.
I got to open Universal Studios Horror Nights years and years ago, and to advertise it, we had, because Universal owns all of the Hitchcock films, and they have the Psycho House there. I got to do the approach to the Psycho House, cut by cut, that Hope Lang does, when she walks up to it looking for her sister Janet Leigh. With that, they cut to the house using the original Hitchcock footage, and then back to me. But I was using the real Psycho House. At the end, I'm in the shot with the Psycho House. And, you know, when you start getting in that rhythm, the way Hitchcock shot, it is really an extraordinary manipulation of your own senses. He's really, you know, film messes with time. It extends time, or it can truncate time and shorten it. And it does something to us when we sit in the dark, you know, with our popcorn and our big gulp and our melting Chico's bonbons. And something happens though between that screen, that flickering light and shadow, and those cuts, that subliminal editing. It kind of works its magic on you. And just doing it, it kind of hypnotized me. So I understand why you want to do Psycho.
And you give into it, and you want to give into it. You present yourself like, okay, take me into your world. And I think Hitchcock did something like 90 or 120 cuts in the knife scene, in the shower scene, without ever showing the knife or the blood, right? Until at the end you saw the water go down the drain. You know, there were many, many, many cuts. Boom, 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 without showing the actual
4 or 5 sides just of Janet Leigh's eye, two eyes tight, one eye extremely close. Just her eyes, he spent hours just coming in closer, you know, because the eyes represent so much fear, and that's also where they get that idea, Eisenstein.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's also the perspective when you're talking about horror effects. I mean, there's being on the back lot of Universal, the Psycho House in film is towering and almost oppressive. When we actually see it there, it's quite small. It's kind of interesting how the perspective of things change so much, and how you play with the angles you shoot to create this effect.
Everything's smaller, even the actors in real life.
Thank you. Next question.
For everyone on the panel, how would you describe, or can you describe and talk about Wes Craven's style or methodology, if you will, in directing? How would you describe the way he directed?
Madam?
Well, you know what? There's a couple things about Wes. One, he was very avuncular and professorial, and you know, he was always dressed impeccably. So just his presence on the set was always very. He added an element of elegance and of wit and charm, and it sort of, because he presented himself that way, there was just a level of class that used to always, I think, be on set that isn't as much anymore. And as far as his directing style, he really cast the movie with people he believed were going to tell the story, to help bring his story to life in the best possible way. So he wasn't like super interfering or manipulating. He would just kind of, you know, he had a soft guiding hand to keep us in the proper arc for our story, and was always very kind. And you know, when I freaked out in the rotating room, he was, you know, we were on a tight budget, and I was freaking out, and he just was like, all right, you know, he was just always very kind. His vision was so clear; it was very easy to follow his lead and help tell the story that he wanted, in my opinion.
He also, Wes, I think one of his gifts was, when he was a child, he was not allowed to watch television or go to the movies except for one Disney movie a year. So Wyss was always catching up to previous culture, rock and roll, blues, jazz, movies that he hadn't seen, and because of that, there was a sort of arrested adolescent in Wyss. And even though Wyss probably had an IQ, breaking through the ceiling, Wyss had this sort of 14-year-old boy that was part of his personality. And sometimes it would manifest itself in a giggle, and sometimes in a bad pun. I remember on Part 7, we have a thing in Hollywood, when you're late to eat lunch or dinner on the set, if you go too long without feeding the crew and the teamsters and the actors, we all get a bump in our pay. We get a little extra money. It's called a meal penalty. And they can add up on a movie, especially when you're working on location. And if you guys remember the big giant white python in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and me and the sort of abstracted Freddy Hell, we used the white python, and it had a bunch of little slithering babies, and those were eels, and we couldn't get them to do what we needed, and we were trying, and Wes said, oh, for God's sakes, we got to get this shot, or we're going to have an eel penalty. He's this grown man cracking this bad pun, but that's the sign of an intellectual. He just couldn't stop using his mind and playing with it. But he kind of always respected and kept him, and kept a little Wes Craven alive in him. But also there's a visual Wes. If you guys saw Serpent in the Rainbow, that's a very different looking film than anything else he's done. And that's the visual style. I didn't work on that film, but that's Wes's visual style coming out. Ronnie, what do you think?
Well, I remember the impression of lightness from Wyss. He was lightweight, he was tall and slender, he was blondish, blue-eyed, wore pastel a lot, light-colored sweaters, cashmere, light-colored pants. He spoke softly and clearly. He did not like improv. I could do improv, but he didn't want that. But he was appreciative, and he thanked me for my work. Even long after the film was done, he thanked me for the work I had done on my hair during the movie by letting it get less and less perfected, so that Marge was falling apart, and I used my hair to show that, and he thanked me for that later. He was respectful on the set, always. When Marge had her scene in the furnace room of showing the claws, he made sure that the set was silent. I remember the suits had to come to the set that day. I'm not sure whether it was one of those finishing money things or what, but he made sure that the set was completely silent. He was considerate. The only time he lost patience with me was on rehearsal before we ever started, when I thought it would be funny to have real gin in Marge's bottle, and Wyss did not think it was funny.
It was a big scandal, I remember that.
But it was my joke, and it did not go over. But other than that, he was, and even then he was polite, it was just, no, don't do that.
I remember because Johnny Depp and Nick Corey sort of took your side with that, because they're so rock and roll. That, Ronnie's so rock and roll, she's going to have real gin.
I just thought it was
so
funny.
Cool.
I brought my own prop, my Gilby's, or whatever. We were rehearsing, you need your props, but it was, Wyss did not think it was funny. But other than that, and even then, he was right,
So
Great insights, thank you.
Thank you. We're actually going to have to wrap this up. I'm really sorry that we can't get to all of your questions. I wanted to ask you guys real quick just what was next in mind for you, like some of the stuff you're working on now, and kind of talking with you. And then,
I have a movie coming out November 4th in the theaters called Badland. It's a Western. It's really good. If anybody is into Westerns. And I have a supernatural thriller coming out in February of next year called The Orchard that has a really good cast. It's Thomas Jane and Jane Moore and a whole chock-a-block full of people. And in the Western, it's Vera Sorvino and Luther and Wes Studi and Jeff Fahey. It's a good group of people. So both those movies, both those movies are really good, and I hope you guys go see them. I think you'll really like them.
Tell them about your TV show.
Oh, and I have a horror movie streaming on Amazon Prime right now called The Id. That's really disturbing. So if you like stuff like that, I've got it for you. I'm bringing it on that one. And then go watch those things.
Did you tell them that you literally have a call for Tuesday?
Oh, I'm doing a TV show, which I'm super excited about. But
She just got this while she was here, you guys.
But then I was reading something, because it happened while I was here, that I'm not supposed to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
But I've been telling everyone, don't tell anyone. We're just filming this.
Anyway, Amanda literally is flying home on Labor Day and working the next day. Ronnie, what are you up to?
So happy.
My claim to fame at the moment is the Martin Scorsese movie on Netflix called Rolling Thunder Review, a Bob Dylan story by Martin Scorsese. I'm in it. And thank you. And then last year I had a release of a French film documentary called We Blew It. And it features a lot of 70s people, a lot of directors and producers and writers, and me too. Called We Blew It.
I go back, I don't have to put my pancake on as quick as Miss Wyss, but I'm starting work on Thursday on my new travel channel series, True Terror with Robert Englund, which is not urban legends, and I have nothing against urban legends, as most of you know, especially the lovely urban legend Alicia Witt. But no, this is all true things. These are reported, two sources, printed in newspapers by journalists over the last 100, 150, 200 years in America. Things that are slightly offbeat, occult, dark, people that were buried alive in the Civil War, and just really interesting stories, but they're all documented in newspapers. Somebody's been doing their research with the Travel Channel all over America on these strange stories, dark stories, and they've been shooting it all over America, and I've got to go and now match my hosting part and my narration part to the stuff that they've been working on so far. But the first 3 episodes I've read, and I really like all of them, so I want to do my best. So even though I'm a little hoarse from doing the Freddy laugh on request for all you Elm Street brats out there, I should be healed. I think a lot of tea and honey and coffee ice cream will help me.
I forgot to mention that I have a new album. It's called Atom Bomb Baby. And it's in the final stages of being licensed and uploaded and all that kind of stuff. And the single is called Hurricane, about the great boxer Reuben Hurricane Carter and the misjustice in his case from several years ago, many years ago, which still applies today.
You guys know that movie with Denzel Washington? Yeah, okay.
Well, on behalf of Dragon Con, I'd like to thank you guys. It's been a great honor to have you. Give them